Are you kidding me? Playoffs? The Denver Broncos had to grind out a really tough win today against the Raiders. Ultimately, they still won by 10 points, 29-19, but there were moments where it felt like pulling teeth in that game. But as good teams do, the Denver Broncos found a way to ultimately get the job done. The Broncos, winning that game, now have got a massive advantage in terms of the playoff race. Let's go ahead and bring in the current playoff picture for the Denver Broncos. All of the games that affect playoff seeding for the Denver Broncos have been played. The only AFC game that is left is the Chargers and Ravens game on Monday Night Football, and that one will not affect seeding for the Denver Broncos. No matter what happens here, we might end up ultimately seeing this Chargers and Ravens team. They might flip-flop. That's if the Ravens can get a win here, and if the Chargers take an L, then they would flip-flop in terms of their standings. The Chargers would come down here to the number 5 seed, but Denver will still remain at the 7 seed. The good news for the Broncos, though, they now have a 1.5 game lead over the Miami Dolphins, who are rising up the ranks. They got a big win today over the New England Patriots, but looking at the playoff math, according to NFL.com, they only have a 16% chance to get into the dance. They almost have to be flawless for the remainder of the season, and they play the Green Bay Packers on the road on Thanksgiving, which doesn't really favor them, being a South Florida team going into the frozen tundra where it's probably going to be at least at freezing, if not below freezing, and Tua Tagovailoa has a subpar record in games that are below 40 degrees. That is something to keep an eye on, and just the Dolphins team in general. They don't play good football when the weather's cold. I would keep an eye on that. If the Packers are able to win that game on Thanksgiving, that would put Denver with an even bigger advantage over Miami. The Colts fell back down to earth today against the Detroit Lions. That was a big help for the Broncos. Indianapolis looked like they might be able to rise up the ranks, but Anthony Richardson turned back into a pumpkin in this game. He was not good at all. And ultimately, the Colts are kind of looking like they're not going to be a threat. Plus, Denver plays the Colts this year, along with the Cincinnati Bengals. At 4-7, Denver now has a 2.5 game lead over the Bengals. Denver is in such good shape here. Basically, all they have to do is not fumble the bag, and they make the playoffs. The only team that has a legit chance to really challenge Denver is the Dolphins. If the Broncos and Dolphins finish with the same record on the season, Miami has a tiebreaker over Denver. So that is something that you have to be a little bit worried about. But you're kind of hoping that Miami's going to stumble in Green Bay. Maybe they'll stumble another game this year. That's the big worry for the Broncos right now, is the Miami Dolphins. They're the ones that are kind of breathing down Denver's neck a little bit. But according to the odds, man, Denver has a 73% chance. Miami has a 16% chance per this mathematic formula. Bringing in the New York Times mathematic formula, which we've been using for the last few weeks, they say the Broncos have a 68% chance to make the playoffs after their game here. Let's go ahead and give the Broncos a win over the Cleveland Browns just for this math's sake. I do think it's going to be a tough game. The Cleveland Browns gave the Steelers an absolute dogfight. But ultimately, good teams find a way to beat teams with subpar records. The Broncos found a way to win this game. They've got to find a way to win against the Cleveland Browns. For this exercise, I'm going to give Denver the win. I'm also going to give Denver the win here over the Indianapolis Colts. Denver is a far superior team to the Colts. It's at home. Denver should win that game. Against the Chargers, though, on the road, the Broncos haven't been swept by the Chargers since 2010, but the price for sweeping the Raiders this year might end up being you getting swept by the Chargers of all teams. I do think that is Denver's toughest matchup remaining on their schedule this year. And ultimately, I am going to give the Chargers that game, but Denver has a chance to go in and prevent a sweep by the Chargers. Again, something that has not happened since 2010. But for this exercise, I am going to give the Denver Broncos a loss here. It could very well be flipped, though. The Cleveland Browns could pull off an upset win in Denver, and then the Broncos pull off an in-division win over the Chargers. So that could be how that ultimately works out. But for this exercise, this is the order that I'm going to give it. The Cincinnati Bengals, as much as Joe Burrow and their offense have been really carrying this team, they have a god-awful defense, and the Broncos should be able to exploit that. The Broncos should get the win here, and if they get the win, that puts you up at a 94% chance to make the playoffs. And then you've got that game against Kansas City in Week 18, where now that Kansas City has lost a game, they're probably going to already have the number 1 seed locked up by that point. And they'll probably end up resting starters now that a perfect season is no longer on the line. Give me the Broncos to beat up on the Chiefs' backups, and even if the Chiefs' starters play, quite frankly, I think the Broncos smell blood in the water after the game ended the way that it did against Kansas City last time. So give me the Broncos winning that game. So this is kind of the best case scenario, and that ultimately gets you in. That would put you at 8, 9, 10, 11 wins on the season. So that's kind of best case scenario for the Broncos. Let's go over worst case scenario here. Let's say that the Chargers get them, let's say Cincinnati gets them, and let's say that the Cleveland Browns get them. At that rate, you're down at about a 44% chance to make the playoffs, 45% chance to make the playoffs. You would need a lot of help at that point. So this is basically the Broncos fumbling the bag at an epic level. That's worst case scenario, but best case scenario here is going to be something like this. Most realistically, it's going to probably end up something like this. And that still has you at really good numbers here. 89% chance to make the playoffs. That's pretty damn good, man. I will take that all day long. The fact that we are having this serious of playoff conversations here in Denver at this point in the year is incredible. This is the best record at this point in the year that the Broncos have had since 2016. That's incredible. So at this point, basically all Denver has to do is not fumble the bag, and they make it. All right, Broncos country, be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. We are closing in on 5,000 subscribers, guys. I really believe that we can get there by the end of the day. So if you guys have yet to subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it. It only takes a second to do. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.